small knowledge which I gathered, in the decade of experience which I have. Okay, so let's begin. So we'll start with first with my profile and my experience and quick introduction, right? So myself, Muhammad Imad. So I am currently working here in Abu Dhabi for a leading Islamic bank over here. In total, I have 15 plus of work experience. If you ask me about my educational qualifications, I have done my BTech Computer Science Engineering from Hyderabad itself, which is Shadan College. And basically, I started my career over there in Hyderabad itself. Starting with a very basic fresher job that was especially into game development, wherein I joined as a QA testing engineer in Electronic Arts way back. I can say, this was in I think 2008, and this is where I started my IT career. And I have worked in Hyderabad for Wells Fargo Bank as well. And then basically I moved to UAE. I've worked for mashallah, so far for 5 banks over here in UAE. So currently, I'm working as a senior project manager. So this is just an overview. And yeah, I mean, being a project manager, what is important for you as you progress in your career as in project management domain, you will have to attain knowledge, good piece of knowledge, both theoretically as well as practically. And this is a couple of industry specific certifications which will actually help you to get into bigger organizations. So this is where to start with. It's called PMP, which I guess everyone is aware of. It's a world famous certification for project managers. It actually endorses your experience and your skill set. So that is highly recommended for anyone who has basic minimum of 2 or 3 years of any kind of project management experience, be it coordination or participating with the project managers as well. This will be counted regardless of your existing profile or job responsibilities. So PMP certification I have done Prince 2, I had done the Agile Scrum Master, and very recently I've done the Safe 6 certification as well, which is it's trending in the market right now because multinational organizations are moving towards the safe framework, which we will talk about in the upcoming slides. Okay. So today what we will be looking at is, basically, I don't know the level of audience. So that's why I have, prepared today's presentation with basic fundamentals and to basically, give a clarity, what project management is all about and, how a person can get into project management domain and then grow gradually in that specific domain, right? And I will be happy to take any questions and answers at the end of the slides. Okay. So to begin with, right? uh, so I don't know why this header is. Can I hide this top header?
No, no, I think it won't go. It used to come actually. So please have slideshow and then basically walk through each slide.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm not used to Zoom. So okay, anyways, so let's begin. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, to start off, right? So the basic crux is that the question which everyone comes to mind is who can become a project manager, right? And is there only technical project managers in the market, or are companies only looking for technical project managers? The answer is no. Okay. So basically, there are three type of project managers, where you will find across the world. You go to any country, any place, any organization, you will be able to find three type of project managers. Again, depending on the complexity and size of the companies. So if we look at first type of project manager is at the business side. So when I say business side, it basically means if someone has a good domain knowledge, okay, which is basically functional knowledge of processes and procedures of any organization or a domain as such, that person can actually try to become a business based project manager. Now, on the other side, to help that business to grow, right, they basically depend on technology. So this is where IT technical project managers come into picture, who will be only focusing on implementing new softwares and applications which will fulfill the business requirements of a line of business or a project. Okay. And then third category of project managers are basically, techno-functional project managers who basically, after working for, let's say 10 years or 12 years, right? Usually project managers are, then judged on the basis of their techno-functional knowledge, which basically means they know the domain, the line of business where they have worked in for, plus they are now aware of the technical nitty-gritties of the systems and applications which are basically helping those business domains. Like for example, if we take a case of myself over here, right? So I've been working into banking sector, which is called BFSI domain, so banking and financial services industry. So this is where I am now well versed, and my market value would be only on the basis of banking organizations, and this is where I have that expertise. But not necessarily that always I have to look for in banking sector or financial services industry. I can basically move into any organizations where a good project manager requirement is applicable as such. Okay. And one more critical item over here which I would like to highlight is that within my network of professionals, I have seen a lot of graduates. Okay, BSc, BCom, graduates who are non-technical have become successful business project managers. Okay, and I have seen a lot of business analysts, project coordinators, QA testing engineer, both manual and automation, solution design architects, any developer, be from any, technology platforms, C++, Java, front end, back end, SQL, database developers, and even in the cyberspace and information security domain as well. I can see a lot of people have moved into project management as well. Yeah. So this is just to give you an overview, an example how people have become successful project managers. Okay. So we'll move on. So what exactly is project management here, right? So see, when we say the word project, okay, project is basically a temporary mission, I would say. Okay. Now any company will start a project, okay, on the basis of few basic parameters. The number one criteria of any project would be that it will have a fixed duration. Okay, which basically means it will have a start date and end date. Okay, and basically that particular project will give result to developing a unique product, or it can be a service, or it can result in any kind of process improvement for the organization. So so when we say a project, right, so let's take a simple example over here which I have mentioned, right? So it can be like basically, let's say in the construction industry, right? If there's an office building which has to be constructed. Now, if you see all the offices in high tech city, Gachibowli, you can see more or less the material which is used in all these offices will be the same. Now, what will change is at the front end level, their elevation design as such, and the look and feel, right? But eventually, those are kind of same projects which are executed, but with a different flavor for the customers to see from outside. So this is just I'm simplifying the meaning of a project. Okay. And basically similar in similar situations we have in IT industry, there are so many software companies who are basically providing services to a lot of clients over here across different industries. It can be government sector, retail sector, banking sector, wherein they develop applications as per the client requirements and they deliver it. But the mechanism, the methodology of projects and project management will remain the same. Okay. So what can a project create, right? So a project can actually create a product. Okay. It can be an implementation service to support a business function. Okay. And the outcome of any project can be some kind of final outcome which the business stakeholders are expecting. Okay. And that will actually have two possibilities. One, it can give a value to the organization as customers. It can be a customer product, or it can be a customer service, or it can be an internal product which the office employees can use themselves. A good example of this can be the intranet portals which a lot of companies have. So if you can see the HR management systems and SharePoint portals which a lot of companies use, now that will allow you to apply for leaves and for your pay slips. So these are like a few examples of how projects are being developed within the organization as well to help their office employees themselves. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Now, if we look at deep dive into project management and how the how projects are being managed and how project managers actually should be managing projects, that requires some kind of knowledge. It requires some special skills, and it requires the project manager to apply some tools and techniques to execute these project activities. Okay, so at a high level, right, what happens in an IT industry is that you get a requirements in the form, if it's a waterfall project as such, right, you will get a business requirements document which will have all the mentioned requirements from business stakeholders. Now the BAs will actually read it thoroughly and break it down into functional components with the technical leads. The project manager will sit and basically do the estimation exercise and then prepare a project plan which will be called as work breakdown structure, and then basically look at the timelines, and then the governance activity of the entire project will start, right? So it's basically the software development life cycle, which basically gets into picture. But then nowadays, okay, I can see the project management function in all the organizations are very very matured. In earlier days when I started my career, it was very very lenient, I would say, because the stakeholders were also not well versed about how projects should be handled, and because of the competition level as well for all the organizations, right, to launch a new product or a service to the market is very very tight. So because of the timelines, every single business stakeholder would be looking very in detail on a weekly basis and asking questions to the project team in terms of where do we stand and what is our next step and are there any issues and risks, so which we will talk about in a couple of slides later. Okay. Okay, so what is project constraints? So when we say project constraint, it basically means any project and any industry as such, right? It will be heavily dependent on few basic constraints. Now, if you see this slide, right, so I'm highlighting that any project will have a scope, okay, which basically means that what is the ultimate objective of the project, okay, that's called the scope. Schedule is basically your project plan, which will have the start and end date and the entire list of activities which will be required to complete the project. Then you have quality. Now, when we say quality, it's basically any developer can build any application and basically give it to testing team, right? Now, the testing team's job over here is to ensure quality. This is where they do entire functional, testing as per the business requirements document. They prepare their test cases and they publish the defects report. There will be a defect triage call on a daily basis to align the stakeholders and see how many number of defects are being set. So this is where quality comes into picture. You have resources, which basically means your cross-functional teams starting from front end, back end, middleware integrations. You will have vendor teams involved. You will have your in-house architecture teams involved. So you have to basically prepare a matrix of and project team which will be responsible to do their specific set of activities, and this should be highlighted in your project kickoff meetings to basically align what kind of resources are required to successfully run your project. Now, risks. Now, this particular category called risks, right? This is very important for project managers to basically identify that why we are delayed, or are there any upcoming risks which is basically blocking the progress of the projects, and this is where the project manager has to closely monitor with each team their defined efforts estimation which they gave and how is the progress moving forward for all the activities, and then basically highlight it in governance forums which I will talk about in a couple of slides. And last thing is budget. So any project we will not have an unlimited budget in terms of spend expenditure. It will have a fixed budget. Okay, this is based on the business case and the project charter, which is basically given to the PMO office. Okay, and so it will have a fixed amount of value, and the project manager's responsibility is to control and make sure that the project is executed within the defined budget as such. Okay, now, so we have been talking about project as such, right? So what project managers do, but there's much more to that. So basically, what happens is, once you start your career, right, eventually you will become, let's say, if you get into project management, you might become like an project coordinator or as assistant project manager as such, and then gradually become a project manager. The next level of project manager then will progress to becoming a senior project manager, or it's called, a program manager. Now, what a program manager does is basically a program manager runs, a portfolio of projects, which basically means that there will be, let's take an example as such for, a company which is trying to implement employees leave and attendance system. Okay, they don't want to purchase a ready-made product or a solution from the market, because they will have to pay a lot of licenses and annual maintenance fees to the vendors. So the company or the organization decides that let's develop it internally. So now, in order to develop an application for leave and attendance system, okay, this has to go through across all the cross-functional teams which are there within the organization, starting from HR. Then it comes to your in the technology category itself. You will have number of cross-functional teams with different department heads. Like for example, you will have one particular department who will be only taking care of requirements or business analysis. So you will have all the business analysts rolling up into requirements team as such. So that is one team. The second team would be, again, depending on the technology, it's called the head development chapter or head of engineering. A person would be sitting and he will be leading the entire development team, which is again segregated: front end, back end, middleware. These kind of segregated different teams would be there, right? So then you will come to your or logistics team. You will have a procurement team. So there are like multiple teams within the organization, but they all want to use the same application to manage their leaves and attendance systems of their team members. So that basically becomes a program. But in detail, if you go, it is like a project for each of the team, but it is standard across all the teams. So that becomes a program. So a program manager will then manage this particular program with all the teams involved, in this particular application development of leave and attendance. Now, in a larger organizations, what happens is specifically, in large scale industries, I can say, let's take an example of Amazon, Flipkart. Okay. Now, if you see these kind of organizations, they will also have, few designations of people who will be known as portfolio managers. Now, what portfolio managers basically do is they basically take care of, let's say 25 to 30 projects, and they will have a program manager and a lot of project managers under them as a reporting direct reportee. And basically, this portfolio manager would be acting as an escalation point to help the project managers and program managers to bring their projects if they are getting slippages in their scheduled activities, and basically bring that back on track in green. Yeah, so there is a designation called portfolio managers as well. Okay, so that basically defines the relationship between what a program means, what does a project means, and what does a portfolio means. Now, so basically, any project which is sanctioned or approved by any industry as such, right? So what basically happens is there will be a specific scope, as we discussed in the earlier slides. So any project again is based on a market demand, or the organization's needs any strategic or mandatory requirement within internal category of the organization. Like the example which I told is for leave and attendance system. There might be a customer client request, okay, to have this project. There can be a technology project, which basically means version upgrade or end of life support. So you need to move. Nowadays, we can always hear that everyone wants to move to cloud, right? So all this on-prem data center hosting is now outdated. All those systems which have been running in the market, which only supports on-prem hosting, are now getting decommissioned, and organizations are then looking for cloud native applications from the vendors, right? So that basically comes under this category called technology advance. There will be a legal requirement. So when we say legal requirement, it basically means that there is a regulator in the market who's basically mandating it to the organization that you have to implement your systems to comply with these standards. A classic example of this category can be banks, wherein we can see that there is a central bank in each and every country in this part of the world, right? So what central bank does is it basically sends instructions and mandatory circulars to banks, saying that do this and this kind of changes in your current systems, or we are rolling out universal card scheme program. Just like now, everyone might be aware that there is a Jaiman card scheme which has been rolled out, which basically means that you Indians can, when they travel to Dubai for their holiday purpose or work purpose, right? So any Indian who's traveling to Dubai can basically use their UPI, which is Phone Pay or Google Pay, to pay your payments over here in the UAE, right? So that is like a mandatory requirement which has been agreed by both the central banks of both the countries, which is Central Bank of UAE and Central Bank of India. So that kind of projects are again called falls under the category of social requirement. Then there's social need, there's environmental considerations. Again, different categories which a project falls. Now, so if looking at all these parameters and the responsibilities of a project manager, which we have been seeing in these past slides, right? It is we might be thinking, oh, there's too much for a project manager to handle over here, and what is the helping hand for a project manager? So that helping hand for the project manager would be the one particular department or a team which will be available in any organization. Okay, it's called Project Management Office, PMO. So what does a PMO does? So what will happen is, if we look at large scale organizations, they will have, if you ask me, a minimum of let's say around 100 to 200 project managers. Okay, and each and every project manager has different characteristics and different styles to run their projects. Although everyone will follow the basic PMP standards or the agile methodologies which they have learned, right? But still there will be a conflict between the project managers, like who are running these projects. Now, to control these project management people, okay, this is where this project management office PMO team comes into picture, who basically maintains and implements a very structured governance process. Now, what this PMO office tells to all the project managers is, you have to follow specific templates. You have to basically follow standard status report templates, presentations, and then submit it to internal audit teams to basically give the evidence that you have been following the basic project management standards, which the entire bank has to follow for all your projects regardless of your line of business. Okay, so to give you an example, in a bank what will happen is there will be different line of businesses or departments. So one specific example I can give is, there will be a retail business. So when we say retail business, they take care of retail customers. So a bank will always have one division allocated for retail customers. So people like you and me, who basically open our salary accounts, saving accounts, or credit cards, right? So we all come under the retail banking segment. Whereas there is another segment in the bank which is called corporate banking. Okay, so what corporate banking means is that these customers would be corporates. So let's say, for example, we have Emirates Airlines or Etihad Airways. Okay, Now, these airlines have to maintain bank accounts, right, to give salaries and pay to their vendors. So what they do is they basically go and open bank accounts in different banks, and they become, corporate customers, because that is an organization which is dealing with the bank. So they fall under the category of corporate customers. So corporate customers again have different requirements. So they have different type of their accounts to be maintained by the bank. They have, different technology integrations for their, reconciliation and financial purposes. And then they have some regulatory requirements as well, right? So it's a different line of business. So that falls under corporate banking. And the first one which we talk is for our retail banking. So what will happen is a bank will be having, a lot of projects across retail and corporate, but all these project managers will be following these standard mandated governance processes and templates which the PMO office will give to them. And the PMO office will also conduct, governance one-to-one sessions with project managers to ensure that, all the project managers are following the, specific templates and the checklist which they are supposed to follow for executing their projects. So it's not like a freestyle game over here wherein a project manager comes in and, runs the entire project by his own wish. There will be a PMO office in every organization, and this actually helps the project manager, to how to handle some risk and issues and, tough situations during the execution of the project, to basically engage with PMO office and then, seek help. So I'll be talking about this more in our next couple of slides. Okay. So so basically, what is the role of a project manager here is that to achieve whatever the project objectives are, okay, and the project manager should be well aware of the project has to be executed and what are the related activities, and then basically also look at the team performance of the entire project team of each and every individual. So a project is only successful where there is a team effort. Okay, it's never a one-man show, or the entire credit never goes to a project manager himself. Okay, the entire credit for a successful project goes to the entire team, and this is where, the performance factor is has to be determined by the project manager, and basically then appreciate, each and every hardworking person who has contributed in the due course of the project. Okay, so for a person to become a project manager right now, these are the basic level of skill sets, one should have. Okay, so starting with first item would be leadership quality. Now, when I say leadership quality, right, we all have some leadership qualities. Okay, it's just that we don't identify it, at the right time, or we feel that okay, we don't have leadership qualities. Now, a leader is one who basically, gives direction, or a leader is one who gives empathy. Okay, when I say empathy, it basically means that you are solving your team's problems. Okay, so it necessarily does not mean authoritative. Okay, so we should not take an example when it comes to leadership like Hitler. Okay, so we all know how Hitler used to manage, and his principles of, managing the country and the rules and regulations, right? So that is not democratic, it was more authoritative, which basically means that in today's world, right, if you're a project manager and you're calling for a team meeting, okay, and if you give a direction, or you give kind of a justification to them saying, you need to complete this task by so and so date, and I don't want to hear any excuses or any reasons from you, then you are a very bad project manager. Okay, now this is where your leadership quality has to be top notch, which basically means that you need to listen, you need to hear, you need to understand, your team's perspective, to justify, why x number of days or effort is required to build an application, and then streamline and align your teams. So any project, right, in the domain of technology, okay, in IT project management, you will have to make sure that your entire team is going synchronized. Okay, which basically means your BAs, your developers, front end, back end, middleware developer, then you have your database engineers. Okay, you will have your information security who will be doing the kind of penetration testing, load testing, performance testing. Okay, and you will be having all your information security approvals to be needed. So anything which goes in, right from requirements design development, goes to system integration testing of your SIT UAT, and then getting all the security approvals, and then proceeding to CAB for change advisory board to get your release package into production. So your infrastructure team has to be aligned. So this entire alignment, you have to do a full forecast on kickoff meeting itself. So even before you start your project, you have to spend a lot of time with your team members who are involved in your project, listen to them, understand their efforts, and this is how a successful project manager will build his project plan and then lead the entire team, right? So that is the main aspect, I would say, in terms of the leadership quality. Team building, we just spoke about it, how a project manager has to align all the teams over here. Then you also have to motivate. Okay, so what basically happens is, I have worked with TCS as a vendor. Okay, now TCS company as such is branded as the retirement company. So I can see there's a very laid back culture, in that particular organization, right? They are not motivated as such, right? So this is where a project manager or a program manager as such has to keep the motivation levels up in order to get the productivity from all the teams. Okay, so that is also a critical factor called motivation. Now communication. Now, I have never seen a project management professional who is weak in communication. Okay, so if you ask me, if let's take an example of a building construction. Okay, now, a building can be constructed for one floor as well as it can be constructed for 100 floors. Okay. Let's take an example of Burj Khalifa. So we all know Burj Khalifa, right? Here in Dubai. So that basically is the tallest building in the entire world. Now, the foundation of Burj Khalifa, okay, it has been built so strongly, right? This is where they were able to go and achieve 145 floors of construction. So, similarly, if someone wants to become a project manager, or a project manager wants to become a program manager, or wants to become head of project management in the organization, or wants to become a portfolio manager and grow up the ladder, your basic foundation has to be very very strong, and that is communication. Okay, without communication you cannot succeed in this particular domain. So I strongly advise to all of you who are there in this session, plus wherever I meet with my network of professionals and my friends and families, I tell all my youngsters that please focus on your English communication and improvise as much as possible, because in today's competitive world, without communication you will not be able to survive in competitive markets as such. Okay, so that's a very key aspect of communication. Influencing decision making, political and cultural awareness, negotiation skills, trust building, conflict management, coaching. These are some kind of characteristics which a project manager will develop as he goes up the ladder, and as he goes deeper into the work experience. Yeah, it will not come on day one. Like for example, negotiation skills, right? So these kind of negotiation skills between, there's a conflict between three teams. So a project manager has to step in and then align, understand, and negotiate between the three teams to get the deliverables on time as per the project plan as such, right? Then there is cultural awareness, there's political factors as well. So you need to play a role of a guy who's bringing happiness to all the teams. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you are a kind of person who's going and begging to each and every team to get the work done. No, that should not be the case. You have to be a personality which will have a kind of an assertive nature. Now, when I say assertive nature, it basically means you have to be aggressive sometimes, but at the same time, you have to be, a very chilled kind of personality when you're talking to your team members. So you have to balance that kind of relationship over here, right? And this is the basic, characteristics which a successful project manager will do to influence and then build that trust with all your teams who are involved in the project. Okay. All right. So, what are the life cycle stages of any project, right? So, if we look at over here, these are the basic, I can say different stages where a project undergoes. Okay. So, if we look at stage number one, it's basically called, initiation or conception stage. Okay. It basically means we will have a project charter and we will have, project initiation activities over here. I think it will be a detailed session if we talk about project charter. Maybe inshallah we will do it in some other session where we go deep dive to understand what does project charter means. Okay, but I'll leave it to high level as of now, of today. So that is under the initiation stage. Then you have a planning stage where you need to have scope and budgeting exercise done. You need to have a work breakdown, schedule, structure, which basically is part of your project plan. You need to have a Gantt chart to show your senior management and your managers how the project timelines look like. So that is a very important capability of Gantt charts to be available, how to manage it, how to create it. So you need to be very well versed. So any project manager who's trying to excel and grow up the ladder has to be very hands on this particular tool called Microsoft Project. So if you go to US, UK, Europe, UAE, any part of the world you go, each and every hiring manager will first ask you whether how hands-on or how much do you rate yourself using Microsoft Project. Okay, so if someone is lacking behind and still using Excel to develop project plans and all, it's outdated in the current market. Okay, so please go for learning this Microsoft Project tool. Okay, we will conduct another session as well, inshallah, in future. So you will have communication plan, you will have risk management, and then you basically do the status and tracking. You will have some KPIs to basically give your business stakeholders. When we say quality, it's again about controlling your testing timelines over here. As a project manager, you have to keep an eye in terms of how many number of test cases are being executed on a daily basis. How much is the estimated time for completing all the test cases, and then that is called round one of testing. Then you ring fence it, you do a round two regression testing. So you need to have a proper plan in terms of which is connecting all the dots over here, right? So that is forecasting is again forecasting your project milestones and dates. So all this comes under the execution cycle. Now, performance and control stage is where basically you will basically control your budgets and efforts, right? It should not be the case that one team had given you an estimation of 10 man days, but then they are overspending it and going towards spending 30 man days, right? So that basically will deviate your project timelines and you will be delayed for go live. So this is where you have to control the performance of the entire project right from day one. Yeah. Now, the last stage, fifth stage, is called project closure or project close. It basically means that you are closing the project. There will be a post-mortem report, right? Then there will be a project punch list and reporting. So that what these terms basically means is that when you close a project, right, you will have a list of lesson learned, like in terms of what went well and what went wrong. So all this have to be documented, and it's the responsibility of the project manager to highlight this to your senior management to showcase your skill set and efforts in terms of how these mistakes which were done in this particular project will be avoided and will not be repeated again in the future projects, right? So it's a very important stage of project closure. Yeah. Okay. So all what we have been talking about is project management, right? But there are specific tools and techniques, and there are knowledge areas. Now this particular slide, I've just kept it over here for the people who are interested to grow up the ladder, who are already practicing project management. They need to be PMP certified, right? So when you go for PMP training and certification, you will have to learn about all these tools and techniques and knowledge areas. So again, it's basically the same thing what you are practically doing in your day-to-day project management life, but theoretically you should be well versed in terms of what all these knowledge areas and what these tools and techniques means in order to get your projects successful. Okay. Now, When we say that, what would be the project management tools and techniques as such, right, which, a project manager will implement and adopt. So some specific examples, if I have to give, right, this will again fall under the category of project constraints. Like over here, if you can see, there is a word called scope, there is a word called time, then we have cost. So these are the basic, constraints for any project, right? So from a scope perspective, you need to have a project charter, you need to have a SOW contract if there's any vendors involved in your projects. You need to have a WBS, which is work breakdown structure. So work breakdown structure will give you a full list of tasks and the dependent activities. And if there are multiple teams involved in the project, then it's basically called, dependency tasks, which are interdependent. For team A to move forward, it needs team B or team C to complete a specific activity, right? So all these kind of interdependencies have to be captured and then basically tracked by the project managers, and it also has to be highlighted to senior management, and that can be only achieved if you are maintaining a very good work breakdown structure in your Microsoft project plans. Okay, so that comes from a scope perspective. Now, if we look at time perspective, right, it talks about your Gantt charts, network diagrams, critical path analysis, critical chain scheduling. So there will be, few key tasks without which, your teams cannot move forward, right? So if I have to give an example, right, it's basically called, time factor for prerequisites. So let's say your testing team, right, they will basically highlight you that if the environments of SIT is not ready, or if the environment of UAT is not ready, so the test engineers will not be able to start executing their test cases, right? So they have a direct dependency with the infrastructure team and development teams. So this is where, as a project manager, you need to analyze and have your path analysis done to avoid any delays for any kickoff activities. Like for an example, which I just highlighted, a testing team will never be able to start their test execution activities if the environment is not ready, okay, or if the deployments are not done on time. So this is from a time perspective, which you have to use as your tools and techniques. Then comes from a cost factor. Okay, so each project will always have a project sponsor. Okay, so when I say a project sponsor, will be a person sitting in the business unit as a department head, who's basically funding the project and giving salaries to each and every project team members. So his core focus would be, number one, whether the project is on the right track, okay, whether it is on red, amber, or green, okay, and how much money are we spending. So any project charter and the project plan, right, at the initiation stage, the project manager's responsibility is to work with business and IT stream leaders and come up with capex and opex planning. So what capex means is basically capital expenditure, which is basically the expenses which the project has to burn out funds during the implementation or the start date or end date of a project. So what will happen is, let's take an example of any system which has been newly implemented in the organization. So all the effort and money which is required to implement a new system is called capex. Okay, and once the project is completed and it is moved into production, then what will happen is there will be a production support team who will take care of all the defects and bugs which will be reported by business stakeholders after going live or after going into production. So that is basically your operating expense. It's called OPEX. So you have to make sure if there are any vendor-based licenses and vendor payments which you have to do for a system after completing the project, that is known as OPEX. So as a project sponsor or the business head would like to know, how much would that money be available for his forecast and planning on a yearly basis. He has to pay as part of OPEX. So all this have to be done at the time of project, kickoff itself. Now, what basically happens is, you will have a lot of, issues coming up, and there will be team conflicts and delays, and, you will not be able to get support from certain development technical leads and their engineering managers. So the most powerful tool, I would say, for a project manager or a program manager would be the governance meetings. Okay. So what a project manager or a program manager should do is basically conduct a weekly meeting as a status update, okay, with all the business team leads, I would say, okay, and then basically publish a rag status report. Now, inshallah, in the next couple of sessions, we will look at what all these, how does a weekly status meeting look like? What does a rag status report means? Okay, but this is more from a reporting perspective. So RAG basically stands for red, amber, and green. Okay, so any project which is falling under these categories, amber or red, will have to be escalated in the monthly steering committee meetings. So this fancy word called steering committee meetings basically means that on a monthly basis, a project manager, right, when he or she is facing a lot of issues or disagreements from engineering managers or technical leads, he has to now go to the escalation point of contact, which will be the chief information officer or chief technology officer or head of IT. Now, head of IT does not have time to basically come and attend each and every project, weekly meeting as such. So it is the duty of a project manager to basically conduct a steering committee meeting wherein all the department heads will come, okay, and the project manager will then highlight the project risk and issues and delays and all this kind of disagreements and conflicts which he is not able to resolve with the teams, okay. So in steering committee meetings, you basically the project manager will give a walkthrough of the status update of the project and also highlight disagreements and risk and issues which he's facing. So what happens is someone is trying to act smart and basically fight with you. And we generally face a lot of issues where people have some personal commitments during the weekends, and the project manager is actually pushing them to come and work over the weekend, right? But they are not agreeing to it. So then what you need to do is go to the and speak to their reporting line managers. And even if they don't listen, you need to highlight these in such kind of meetings called steering committee meetings, which will have executive management involved. And when it comes from the top, everyone says yes. Okay. So this is like a tool and technique for a project manager to how to get your work done and how to get, people get their tasks done on time. If there is any genuine reason because of technical complexity or anything else due to which they are not able to complete tasks, then the project manager has no other option but to ask and seek support from the teams to actually extend their normal working hours or work over the weekends, so these kind of decisions and commitments have to be highlighted and take approvals from steering committee meetings as such. Okay. Now, I've just put this slide to give you an example how in Microsoft project, okay, a project plan looks like. So if you see, there will be a sequence of activities, right? Like for example, over here, there's a conception stage, initiation stage, define requirements, define the specific functionality, develop a project plan, brief the web development team. So all these kind of tasks will then fall under the stage of requirements, design, development, testing, information security approvals, infrastructure readiness, go live, cab approvals. So it will have, everything will be time boxed. It every in each and every task needs to have a start date and end date, right? And this is where how a project manager will control the timelines and then give status updates to all the senior stakeholders. Okay, now an example of how a project, organization structure looks like, right? Or how does a project team looks like in bigger organizations. So there will be a project sponsor, okay, who's basically funding the entire project. Now, this particular person will be either some department head or from business side, or if it is a technology upgrade project, then it will be from CIO or CTO. Okay. Now, this particular person will have a dedicated project manager to run his specific project. Okay, and the project manager will have to control all this kind of departments or teams who are listed over here. They will be consultants. When I say consultants, this would be your EY or Deloitte consultants who are required for any compliance and regulatory projects. Then you will have a compliance or regulatory teams. You will have a local regulator, which can be, in the case of a lot of banks, you have to deal with central banks. You will have a stakeholder board. You will have IT department, which again consists of cross functional teams. You will have global stakeholders. You will have procurement for SOW contracts. You will have a steering committee. You will have client staff. You will have process procedures. You will have offshore onshore teams. You will have testing teams. You will have internal audit team who will basically come and question the project manager about different aspects of the project execution. There will be a change delivery team who will basically ask you for artifacts to get you the approvals for deployments into SIT, UAT, and production. You'll have senior business leaders, you'll have middle office, you'll have temp staff, and then you will also have a PMO team who will look at whether the project manager is following the basic standards or not. Okay, so all these teams who are listed over here as an example, everything has to be handled by the project manager. So from an IT technology perspective, I've just kept this basic slide, because in today's world, if you go to any organization and you're aiming to get into project management, into the technology teams, then you need to be well versed either of the two frameworks. Okay, one, you have to be very strong in waterfall methodology of project management. Okay, or you can be a very strong person in the agile framework. Now, inshallah, in the interest of time, we will conduct different sessions in future to, deep dive the difference between waterfall and agile. But I've just given here as an example. Modern way of working in 2024 and 2025. What does this basically means? So if you see in the past decade as well as such, the focus was on waterfall kind of projects where each stage of planning, build, review, test, deploy will have some specific step-by-step process, step-by-step delivery of project sub team members, and then the project gets completed. But this has now become outdated. Now each and every organization in today's world is looking into agile framework. Okay, now again, agile has different categories. One is called agile for your team development itself, having agile squad which will follow the Scrum framework for project to be executed, that gets converted into user stories and stuff like that. So it is like an iterative approach where you will have weekly sprints or planned level of sprints every 2 weeks, where you have to do multiple activities in synchronization in parallel method. It requires planning, build, review, and test, goes hand in hand. Yeah. So we will talk about and in detail in the next couple of sessions. But this is just to give you an understanding that how the basic differences between waterfall and agile. Plus there are a lot of frameworks which have been come and it's getting rolled out by organizations where they want to go into safe model, disciplined agile, less Nexus, Spotify. We all know what is Spotify company, right? So they have adopted an agile process, and that is now named and adopted by across the organizations in the world. It's called Spotify model. So these are the different type of frameworks which project managers have to adopt in order to become a project manager or a scrum master or an agile manager. So this is just an example how the scaled agile framework looks like and how it works. But this is at a very advanced stage, and this is actually now trending in the market, I can say. So big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and leading banks are actually now using and moving towards this kind of framework of project management. And then we have a program board wherein there's tracking done. This is how agile board looks like for in agile delivery mechanism, or delivery managers use this kind of tools to basically look at their backlogs, their planning, execution activities. So I think this brings us to the end of the session. I want to make this session very interactive. I want to hear, the list of questions from your thoughts and minds so that I can help and answer. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Muhammad Imad bhai. This is very detailed session, I would say. Thanks a lot.